talk about common relationship problems and how you can use astrology to reparent and love yourself with the upcoming retrogrades. Oftentimes, I hear a lot of people making complaints and frustrations, and they're like, how come I haven't found love and success in commitment and relationships and things of that nature, which is very Saturnian. There's a lot of like blocks and hidden information. There's a lot of karma that's there that people aren't aware of, and that's something that we can work through with Saturn retrograding in Pisces. So that's something that I think is so important. And oftentimes I tend to attract a lot of Scorpios like in my life, and like I have like a huge clientele of Scorpios, which is why I created a Heal Your Shit reading, which is designed specifically for Scorpio rules psychologists. And what I've noticed is that so many intelligent people that are hyper aware of their trauma end up being convinced that they're meant to be single and alone because they can't find the kind of relationship that they want, and there's like one-sided attraction and incompatibility and all of these different things. And so they're convinced like I'm meant to be like alone. I'm not meant to be in a relationship, which is very anti-relationship. And here's the thing, if you were meant to truly be alone, anti-relationship still has the word relationship in it. So like once you start to develop a healthy relationship with the relationship, you work through your traumas, and it may not even be that you have more trauma to work through, but it may be that now is the time for you to kind of maybe you have to wait for certain things in your chart to be activated. Some people are meant to experience relationships later in life because there are certain things in your business, in your finances, other areas that you're meant to work through that you intended to do before you came into this physical incarnation that you were meant to work through. And so once you've gone through that and everything's been properly activated, if you truly decide that you want to be in a relationship, it shouldn't be a trauma response. It shouldn't be an avoidant trauma response of, I want to avoid these shitty relationships. I guess I'm meant to be alone. I keep having these crappy relationships, so I guess that means I'm meant to be alone, because that's an environmental response. And the truth is, even if you're meant to be alone, you should still be, if you're in a healthy place with relationships, you should still be attracting relationships with quality people, and maybe you guys have the same values and you guys really click and you're gracious about it, but you still choose to reject the person because you're like, you know what, I choose to be single, and it's something that makes you feel good. It's something that you enjoy, because Venus is about receiving energy. It's about love. It's about these positive qualities. And so those are things that should be coming into your life that you choose to decline, not something that you are choosing to reject because you're having negative experiences. And a lot of times what I notice is that so many people are very like convinced, and they're very aware of their traumas, and they're like, I've worked through traumas, I'm aware of my traumas, and I'm still attracting these things, so I must be alone. And as an astrologer, I can tell you that really, if you're like really convinced that you're meant to be alone because you've worked through your traumas and this and that, and you're in that state, you're probably in the energy of Scorpio, and Scorpio rules trauma triggers, trauma loops, and trauma healing. So when you've actually worked through your traumas, you should actually let it go, and there should actually be little to no focus on your traumas, and you should actually be in the energy of Sagittarius, because as you work through your traumas, like every sign, every house dissolves the energy of the previous sign, the previous house. Scorpio is a darker, moodier sign. It's very secretive, it's very defensive, it's very guarded and stuff, and there's a lot of duality, but it's also a very fixed sign. It's fixed, so you're not in a growth mindset. And so when you're not in a growth mindset, you don't see things in like the full, bright, optimistic way. You're not able to see things from a different perspective the way you can with Sagittarius. As you get the triggers, as you go through the loops, and you're ready to let it go because you've learned everything you can and you've moved on from it, this is essentially like Scorpio is the only sign that can transmute its element from a water to a fire sign. So you shouldn't be like in this ruminating space once you've healed through your trauma, and you should feel energized And like when Scorpio transmutes its element to a fire, that's when you're ready to move into the fire sign of Sagittarius, which is optimistic. So that's something that's really important. And when you do that, like Scorpio it's a fiery water sign because it's ruled by a fiery planet like Mars, but it's still a water sign that's frozen. But what happens when you put frozen water near fire? The water starts to melt, right? That should happen. You should soften. You shouldn't be so like, I am so aware, I am so convinced, I am so this. Like, you would be letting go of the narrative. Because if you're hanging on to a narrative, that's a sense of emotional control. To have to, like, it's uncomfortable to let go of that narrative, that control that gives you that sense of stability, that clarity, something that's defined, because it's dysregulating to the nervous system to go into the unknown and be like, I don't know why I'm single, or, like get into that state of uncertainty. I don't know when I'm going to get into a relationship. And there can be a certain level of solace and release from the idea of, if you surrender to the idea that you're meant to be single, then what ends up happening is that you tell yourself like, okay, well then I don't have to date, I don't have to risk being rejected and stuff. So you protect yourself, right? But if you let that go, then you're melting the frozen water and stuff. You're warming up, you're opening up, you're now getting into the optimistic energy of Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is the most optimistic planet. It's the sun, it's the planet that represents luck and stuff like that. And Sagittarius is represented by a centaur, which is half human and half horse. So this is literally like the energy of, you have the higher wisdom of a human and the animal instinct, primal instinct and wisdom of an animal, and you integrate all of that. So the centaurs are really tall, so they can see things from different perspectives. They can climb trees, right? So like if you're meant to be single and it's something that's good for you, you should see it from different perspectives and be like, this is so great. I love the idea that I'm single because I don't experience this. It should be giving you joy and energy. And when you think about like partnerships and thinking about marriage and thinking about having a family and all of these things that you don't have as a result of being single, it should bring you joy. Sagittarius represents goals and spirituality, so there should be some spiritual wisdom and joy and pleasure that you get out of it. But oftentimes what happens is that when you step out of that trauma response and stuff, you start to get into that Sagittarius perspective. If you're single, you're not going to start to feel as bad because you start to become optimistic. Like Sagittarius is it has a bow and arrow, so it's not about minute details the way Mercury is. It's a big picture vision, so it's going to be optimistic and it's going to move in the direction of, like, if you want to be in a relationship, it's going to move in that direction and feel good. If you don't want to be in a relationship, it's going to move in that direction in a way that feels good, that's so inspiring that it inspires other people as well. That's the energy of, if you are meant to be single, that's what you're meant to do. And I want to take the time to share this because I've seen this theme happen so much. I've seen it online. There's just dialogues just everywhere that I'm hearing. And people don't realize, like, if you believe you're meant to be single because of the crappy experiences you had, because you're aware of your traumas, it's probably because you haven't actually let go of them as much as you think you have, because you haven't moved into the energy of Sagittarius. And with respect, honestly, you probably haven't worked through your traumas nearly as much as you think you have, because as an astrologer, I can tell you that the area of your charts that are about traumas, about hidden enemies, your vulnerabilities, your fears, your subconscious, unconscious, like things, your roots, your families, your beliefs, your inherited, like the things that you've inherited, your ideas about family, partnership, all of that stuff are in areas that are by design hidden. And so many people are so convinced that they're so aware. And usually that reminds me of someone, it's like, say you're in a darkened room and you don't realize you're in a darkened room. Things can be dark and you can still adjust your eyes and you can still see things, but that doesn't mean that you're in a brightly lit room where you can see everything clearly. If you are aware as you think you are, you should be like more aware of what you don't know rather than hyper aware of what you do know. You see what I'm saying? And by design, these things are meant to be hidden. And I'm not saying this to discourage you. Like, don't make this into a narrative to reinforce your beliefs. Like, just because something is hidden doesn't mean it can't be uncovered. I mean, think about how many times like hidden information has come to you, secrets that you've discovered. You've been like, oh my God, guess what I found out? Da 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 da. I got the tea about so and so and this and that, right? So these are things that are meant to be and can be revealed, but secrets are meant to hide before they get revealed. So sometimes these things have to be activated. And so I want you to know this, because like, instead of having to just succumb to the idea that you have to be single and mourn the loss of a relationship that you think you can't have, that you think you don't deserve, just consider the possibility that actually, no, you haven't gone through the other side yet. And you get to go through that other side. And that can be frustrating, but also just know that you're not stuck here. That means you can move through this. And that's something that I want people to be aware of. And during this retrograde, it's a great time to do that, because we've got Saturn that's about to be retrograde in Pisces and Venus that's about to be retrograding in Leo. And Venus and Saturn are parent planets. Saturn is the strict father that is very punishing. And it's not that it doesn't love you, it's just it loves in a very like strict, stern sort of a way. It loves you through like disciplining you, and it does this because it wants you to be successful. It wants you to grow into being the best version of yourself, and it creates the discipline in order to like encourage you to grow into the best version of yourself. That's the energy of Saturn. But Saturn is also about blocks, karma. It's about mastering wisdom, discipline, repetition. It's about criticism, right? And it's in Pisces, which is very loving. It's about unconditional love. It's very inclusive and stuff like that. And it's about healing, forgiveness, letting go. So think about, like, what are some things that you can let go of? What are some criticism that you have that you can heal from and gain some wisdom where you can show yourself more love and support? Because this is something that you can work through. And are there some beliefs and sensitivity and pain points and fears and chronic fears and insecurities and vulnerabilities that you have in relation to your father? This is something, and it doesn't have to necessarily be your father, but this could also be your partner, because Saturn is exalted in Libra, and Libra represents partnerships. So this is like an elevated quality. But there's always positive and negative manifestations of every sign, every placement, asteroid, fixed signs, houses, whatever, right? So you want to get to that positive thing. So you have to work hard at it. You have to cover the information that's hidden. And meditation is a great way to do this. Spirituality, healing, letting go, because those are the energy of Pisces. And I really encourage you to really work through that sort of an energy. And then Venus, in contrast to strict, stern Saturn, is the loving maternal support. It's more gentle, it's more nurturing. Mothers are often related to the moon, but Venus is also like how you love in like a maternal sort of a way. And it also represents your self-esteem and your values, and it's in Leo, which is your sign of your confidence, your creative intelligence, your creativity, putting yourself in the spotlight, feeling good about yourself, right? So what are some areas where like you can build your confidence, your self-esteem? What do you value? Where can you bring in more support? Like oftentimes when people have challenges with relationships, I mean, there's so many different possibilities, and I won't know without looking at your chart, but some of the themes I've seen is like you can have a challenged Venus, you can have like problematic Pluto, which is trauma. And because of your traumas, you're not allowing Venus, which is a very receiving energy, to like allow things to come in, or what you do allow to come in is based on some of the, if your Venus is like burned or it's got some challenges and stuff, like without making those corrections, you start attracting relationships, but they're sort of like problematic. Like the problematic themes of your Venus that you haven't worked through are the things that you manifest and stuff. And the relationship that you want is like probably the the healed version of your Venus that you haven't worked through yet, or the timing isn't right yet. And so that's something to work through. And then also Saturn, there's chronic fears, there's blocks, there's avoidance that can take place. But if your attachment style is anxious and you're like, you're codependent, this can be maybe like a clingy energy with like your moon, or, you know, there's different things where it's like, it's very emotionally explosive and things of that nature. But if you're meant to be single and it makes you feel good, fire signs are the independent signs. Like you're Aries, like you should feel energized, you know, you should be athletic, you should feel good, you should feel like a leader. You know, when you're Leo, you should feel confident in yourself. You should feel like the ruler of your motherfucking kingdom, feeling like shit because you're single, and it should make you feel good. Like that's obviously, this is a generalization, and you know, not every single person who's watching this video is going to resonate, but I feel like the people who are meant to resonate from this is going to see the value and kind of be like, oh wait, that makes sense, and be in that energy of Sagittarius like I had already mentioned. So during this time, I really encourage you to reparent yourself with Saturn that I mentioned, and like with a Saturn retrograde and with Venus retrograding in Leo. Like, what are some areas, like what is your relationship with your mother? Like, has she affected or negatively impacted your self-esteem, your values? How can you work through that? What are some ways that's beneficial? And what are ways that you can safely receive support? And use the Venus and Saturn in unison, because Venus rules Libra, Saturn is exalted in Libra. So Saturn can create protection and stuff and create healthy boundaries, while Venus will allow the safe kind of love to come into your life. You see what I'm saying? Now, you may actually not have a negative relationship with your parents, and maybe somewhere along the line, the trauma was because of teachers or friends or a relationship that scarred you, whatever that may be. And so maybe there's wisdom that your father taught you, love that your mother taught you, and this is something for you to be reminded of and to incorporate that into your life. This is something that's so important. And I feel like when you're meant to be single and it makes you feel good, you don't necessarily have Venus in Pisces. And it doesn't mean that if you have Venus in Pisces, you're going to be alone or anything like that. Or even Venus in like the 12th house. But Venus is about relationships. Pisces is the sign of isolation. The 12th house is the house of isolation. So if you have this placement, it can be like, oh, like, you know, maybe you're meant to be alone, but like it should make you feel good. It should be a spiritual experience. And honestly, it should probably feel like, because Venus is exalted in Pisces, I wanted to say that part. And so it should feel like, one, it feels good, and it should actually feel like you're in partnership with your spirituality, so you don't feel like you're missing out if that's your actual journey. You get what I'm saying? So this is something that I just wanted to remind people of, because I think people just aren't aware of it. The other thing is that just because you've worked through your traumas or you've done that doesn't mean that it was necessarily, doesn't mean that you don't have more work to do, doesn't mean that it wasn't effective, but like sometimes you got to do a little bit more, or you got to do a little less. Actually, that's probably what it is, honestly. Like some people are so busy consuming that you're not producing, and it's like that one-sidedness just doesn't work. But like, for example, for me, in order for me to be healthy, it's important for me to be in a good emotional, psychological, spiritual state. I gotta eat well. I have to, you know, make sure that I have like a healthy lifestyle. I'm one of those people, I don't necessarily need as much sleep and stuff, but if my diet is shit, if I am psychologically just like spiraling, I could do everything right and my life is just gonna be in disarray. We all have different areas. And so oftentimes people don't realize that like the way that they've done the work wasn't necessarily compatible to you, so it may not be the most effective. I do have a video where I talk about the best way for you to process trauma using your chart. So when you look at your 8th house, like that tells you like the type of challenges that you can have and the traumas, and also the best way to work through it. So I recommend that you check out that video, because that's definitely something that can give you some insights. I know for myself, I have Aquarius in my 8th house of trauma, which is a very cerebral placement, and it rules astrology. It's very scientific, it's very mathematical and stuff. And so a lot of the common ways of healing, like using therapy, and like, you know, I kept constantly hearing you need to connect with your emotions, and I tend to disassociate. So I felt really discouraged because I was like, oh my God, I need to be in a certain state that I'm not in, so I can't heal. Not realizing that actually for me, I'm not saying, like, you can still, like, anyone can benefit from an emotional process, but there are some methods that are just more effective and better suited for you. So if you've been trying to process your traumas and you are so hyper aware of it, and you're like, I've worked through it, I know my trauma, I know my trauma, I know my trauma, you need to get out of it. That's probably why you haven't actually moved out, is that you're just over involved and over attached to it, and or you have been working through your traumas in a way that actually isn't the most effective for you. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, swimming for me is a great way to exercise. Another form of exercise is, which is beautiful, may not just be like, it doesn't hit the same way. So there's a lot of different things you can do. I bring up the video on the best way for you to process your traumas if that's something that you feel inclined to do, and particularly if you have your either Saturn retrograding in Pisces or Venus retrograding in Leo in your 8th house, then these are going to be great videos for you to check out and work through during this retrograde. Otherwise, maybe taking a step back can be a little bit more beneficial. And honestly, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing this. I mentioned some of the stuff already with, you know, working through your Saturn, your Venus, and your reparenting yourself. And you can look at the house placement and you can use that energy and do this on your own. And if you want a little bit more guidance, I do have a personalized reading called Your Saturnian Love Story. This is like, instead of like the fairy tales, Prince Charming story of like the damsel in distress getting rescued, this is more like your reality-based success story based on your birth chart. Because oftentimes the people that we're meant to end up with, or the people that we're attracted to, there are reasons why we're attracted to them. And the part of the chart that you look at for like who you're interested in, who you flirt with, who you date, that's a different area of the chart that we look at than like your long-term partnerships and your marriage spouses. And so they're not always like connected, and there are similarities. So a lot of times people will feel like, oh, I don't want to be in a relationship because all the people that I've been with have been really, really shitty. Yeah, because you might not actually be looking at the people that you're meant to be with in partnership with. And usually the people you're meant to be in partnership with are healthier than the people that you're romantically interested in if they're wildly different. And this is because your 5th house represents your romantic like interests, the people that you flirt with, the people that you have sex with, the people that you are interested in, but they're not necessarily your marriage partners. And it's the 5th house is right next to the 4th house, right? Your 4th house is about your family, your roots, things like this. And when you like, so the 5th house, that's your relationships. When you count 12 houses away from the 5th house, this is hidden information, subconscious, unconscious, psychological downfalls, hidden enemies, but also unconditional love, spirituality, healing, forgiveness, support, all of these beautiful things. It's all of it. It really depends on how you activate it. But the 5th house, or I'm sorry, the 4th house is 12 from the 5th. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. Your 4th house is about your family. So some people have had just really shitty parents and family and stuff. I have. Some people have had amazing parents, and even if you did, they're not perfect. And your 4th house is about your roots, where you come from, which is not just your family, but it's also your previous incarnations, your ancestors. So throughout your entire lineage, even if you had the most amazing, beautiful parents, somewhere in your family lineage, you had something shady happen. You've had some shady family members or problematic things that occurred. You had a previous incarnation that wasn't all perfect. Like, there's no way in your previous incarnations they were all good and dandy. It just doesn't, no. So that means that like there are oftentimes people don't realize that so much of like the problematic relationship choices that you make are related to things that we've learned from our parents. And your fourth house, this is home to Cancer, which are like little children who think they're like adults. And they're like the little bossy kids that try to be the parent and want to take care of everyone and stuff. But at the end of the day, they're still children, right? And this is because the first house is home to Aries. The second house is Taurus, and then Gemini and Cancer, and on and on and on. Now, the zodiac sign that you have in your first house is going to be determined by your exact birth time. And that's because that's when you come into the world, right? And so that's very Aries energy. That's beginning energy. So regardless of the sign you have here, there are Aries quality in this placement. This is represented by a newborn, which is about like new beginnings. And newborns don't realize that we're separate entities from one another because it just came from the 12th house Piscean energy where everything was interconnected. Like there were no physical barrier. It wasn't 3D reality, anything like that. And as the newborn transitions into the second house Taurus energy, this is where the newborn transitions into becoming an infant and is starting to become aware of its 5 senses. And that's why it's starting to understand the world through its mouth, through its opening. And that's why a lot of babies will start to put things in their mouth and they're enjoying taste, pleasure, smell, touch, all of that, like Taurian, Venusian things, right? And then you transition into Gemini, where children are learning to write and speak for the first time. This is why Gemini represents like learning and like enjoying like creative, like intellectual pursuits and stuff. It's about making connection. It's about languages, writing, reading, because that's what Gemini represents. And then you go into the energy of Cancer. Okay, so there's still very much like that childlike energy in that fourth house. So there's a lot of things that we don't know about that's actually influencing us. And in the astrology community, there's a debate between whether the fourth house represents the mother or the father. And honestly, I've seen it both ways, but either way, the fourth house and the 10th house are the parent access. So like oftentimes when it comes to our partners and the partners that we choose, they're influenced by our parents and the idea of the meaning that we assigned to what relationships are from what we were exposed to before our analytical mind developed. So you can't really, I don't care how analytical you are, how much you think you know and self-aware you are, you cannot analyze something that happened that you weren't able to analytically process at that point in your life because your analytical mind hasn't developed yet. You get what I'm saying? There's sort of that like discrepancy that's going on there. And so there's definitely something to like to work through. And so oftentimes like I noticed that as an astrologer with the reading that I'm offering, your Saturnian love story, I talk about like the archetypes of your partner, the type of person that you're interested in dating, both the ideal qualities, the favorable qualities, and the problematic qualities, and why you're attracted to the person with the problematic qualities, why you're bringing those relationships into your life, or why you're interested in someone who's not interested in you. These are oftentimes rooted in the things we learn from our parents that are in the 4th and 10th house access that people aren't aware of. The 4th house is about closed door, and it's hidden from us when it comes to relationships. The 10th house is traditionally ruled by Saturn, which creates blocks. So there's a lot of things that people aren't seeing that they're not aware of. And so there's like this hidden information. And the thing is, the healed version of you probably wouldn't be attracted to the problematic guys that or the partners that you are interested in, which means there's something to work through. And oftentimes it's a matter of identifying what is that. Like, you know, we try our best through going to therapy, reading books and studying and learning and stuff like that. But if you don't know what's best based on what works for you, based on your chart, it's still a generalized impersonal approach. Think of it like trying to go to a department store to find the perfect fitting jeans for you. I'm not saying it can't happen, but when you get custom tailored jeans, it just hits different, right? That's what happens with astrology, with your personalized reading, is you start to realize, oh, that's why this didn't work. It's not that you were the problem, problem, you probably were just using a system that wasn't designed, that wasn't best for you. So the effectiveness just didn't quite hit the same. So oftentimes it's like when you're looking at your relationships, like understanding like what's going on, not just with your parents and stuff, but like your ancestors, your past lives, like that's not something that you may be familiar with. I have been trained in family karma and ancestral astrology, so that's something that I can look into as well. So if you're interested in learning about that, reach out to me. It's called the Your Saturnian Love Story, where I literally break down the archetypes of your ideal partners, the problematic qualities, why you're attracted to the problematic qualities, what is your inner child trying to resolve by attracting these partners, what do you want to get out of it, and what are some other healthier ways to fulfill that for yourself. And that's also something you can do during this retrograde to reparent yourself and work through that. So this is something that's really great. Oftentimes people tend to have like they get frustrated when there's a retrograde, but the thing is, most of the time the planets are retrograding. And when planets are retrograding, the energy doesn't have full power, but I think that's actually a good thing. As someone who's highly intelligent, I can tell you that it's extremely detrimental in a lot of cases. Think of it like you're speeding through a street in a car, right? Like you're just hitting the gas pedal on the fastest speed that you can possibly go, versus someone who is walking down the street, right? Just leisurely and just noticing everything. Who do you think that they're walking at slower speed because they're not running, they're not at maximum capacity, but the slower person is going to pick up on more stuff, right? So that's why I really enjoy retrogrades, is that it allows you to slow down so that you can see things. So this reading can help you if it's something that you're interested in. And the thing is, like, when you start working through things and you realize, oh, the ideal partner for me, the qualities that they have are going to be these qualities, you can look and be like, oh, is the person that I'm with, is the person that I'm attracting, do they have these qualities? No, they don't. So then you don't feel blind. Like you could go back to the drawing board and be like, oh, okay, what is it that I need to work on? What is the best way? Oh, okay, it's going to take time. There's different indicators and milestones for what it feels like when you work through these things. And so those are things that I'll mention in that reading. So if it's something that you're interested in, reach out to me. I think that it's a great time right now with the retrograde coming up to really examine those things. Either way, I think this is a great theme for us to all explore. So just some food for thought with the upcoming retrograde so that you can really take advantage of this time. And also, the other thing I want to mention is when it comes to these retrogrades, they literally create repeated cycles, and they reveal, like whenever there's a retrograde, whenever there are challenges that come up, that's telling you this is the area for me to work on. So I already made a video on Saturn in Pisces is about karmic promises, and I talk about the personal and collective ways that you can take advantage of this energy with Saturn ruling Capricorn and Pisces, how you can use that energy to really take advantage of the benefits that are available to you. So I highly recommend that you check out that video so that by the time Saturn goes into Pisces, these are things that you can go back to and reflect on to really enjoy the retrograde and to take the leisurely approach. I think that we are so used to just going super fast when we actually need to slow down, and then we're used to the unhealthy speed. So when we're exposed to something that slows down, it feels bad for us. But it's actually a way to be corrective with these two retrogrades, because Saturn is about correction in Pisces. So it's like you can correct that self-love, that spirituality, that healing for yourself. And Venus is about love and support and self-esteem and the things that you value in a sign that's all about confidence and creative intelligence. This is a really beautiful placement when you know how to use it properly. I hope this video helped. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, comment below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.